Seth Berenzweig is a labor and employment attorney, and he joins us now on this Friday. Seth, thanks for hanging out with us this morning. This is a very important topic. I have both sides talking about it. Talk to us, though, about the legality of this. The judge has blocked this until Monday, and there is some concern how legally binding the promise of months of pay actually is. What if Trump actually changes his mind? Do these employees have any recourse?
Well, they would have recourse because ultimately this is a specific offer and it forms a binding agreement that they can enforce. But the thing that's really interesting about this case is that this is the latest gasp by federal unions to try to fight this administration's attempt to right-size the government. There was a short-term win by the unions in an injunction hearing this week that only extends the deadline for the acceptance of this offer by the administration to Monday. So it was just a continuation, and then there will be a hearing on Monday to determine whether or not there's a longer injunction in place. All that the administration wants to do is to save taxpayer funds. As you've noted, we have open offices. We've been trying to get this spending under control. People are fighting against Elon Musk, claiming that he's some kind of a dictator, even though he is simply appointed by the duly elected president of the United States to do a great job. He's uncovered waste, fraud, and abuse. There have been a lot of protests out on Front Street by NGOs and Democrats pushing back on this. But I think this is a weak case. It's an allegation that somehow this is an initiative that violates the APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. I don't think it ultimately applies because that has to do with formal rulemaking. The president has the authority to do this. So ultimately, I think that the president's initiative will prevail.
Yeah, and you mentioned those unions. They represent around 800,000 people, if I'm correct. The White House says that the delay is great as it gives people more time to take up their offer. From an outside perspective, does that sound more like spin, or do you think they actually are looking at this delay as a positive note?
I think the delay actually helps the administration because it defeats the arguments by the unions that this is essentially just an overnight grab and that they're just trying to force people out the door. Now they have more time to think about it. Think about this case in the broader context of what's going on right now in Washington. It's nothing short of remarkable. The government is trying to balance the numbers. During the last couple of years of the Biden administration, it was bringing in $5 trillion and spending $7 trillion. Now, I've never been really good at math, but even I can tell you that that doesn't add up. And we already know through the transparency of this process that a lot of this money is going overseas and is really being wasted in many respects while there are victims of fires in Los Angeles that aren't getting relief. There are people in South Carolina that are homeless because of terrible natural disasters. There's a shortage of money. There's only so much to go around. So this is really right-sizing the government. This is a case that has some short-term legs, but in the long term, it's going to fail because this is not a formalization of a regulation under the Administrative Procedures Act. It's the government going out and following the dictates of the president to take out a scalpel and right-size the government. And this is something that will continue. It will be over the objections of the unions and various Democrats. But this is the fight that's going to be happening here in Washington over the coming weeks.
Yeah, $36 trillion. The bleeding has to stop. So let's turn to Elon Musk, though. Some are criticizing his role in the Trump administration, saying he was not elected. We've heard that. He has no guardrails. We heard that as well. They point to the email, though, he sent to federal employees titled Turning Point, where they were given the ultimatum, quit or face consequences. Does it look like he's overreaching here?
I don't believe so. It is interesting. You've noted that the short-term reference point for this program is fork in the road. That's the term that he used at X. So it's clear that he's an author of this, but I don't think he's overstepping. He's following the directives of the Trump administration. There was a lawsuit that was filed just the other week claiming that this violates certain other provisions of federal law. That's going to fail too, because as long as they follow basic procedures for allowing for transparency of what they're doing, filing a charter document with the Library of Congress and all of those sorts of things where they essentially turn square corners, he's absolutely falling within the dictates of the law. What's really happening here is that you have bureaucrats that are trying to keep the state of bureaucracy and the size of government bloated. And we just don't have the math and we just don't have the money to be able to make that happen. This is well within the discretion of the president. He's acting under the orders of President Trump. these lawsuits are ultimately going to fail. They're very interesting, and they apply different principles of how the executive branch and the White House can right-size the size of government. These are basic principles. They all work at the pleasure of the President of the United States. These are authorized. There'll be some turbulence, but they will be able to bring this plane in for a smooth landing.
All right, Seth Berenzweig, we always appreciate your insight. This story will certainly develop over the weekend. Into Monday, we'll find out what happens. Thanks so much, Seth.